as an open source ECM specialist. I work on ECM and WCM platforms for integrating heterogeneous systems. I work also as a trainer of Alfresco. I'm a certified instructor of Alfresco. I'm certified engineer. I'm one of the 6 guys that try to make some order in the wiki of Alfresco together with Jeff Potts. And I'm the global moderator of the Italian forum of Alfresco. I work at Packet, so I wrote 2 books, one about Alfresco, one about Gating Portal, that is the new JBoss portal. I'm contributing in the Apache Software Foundation, so in a project named Apache Manifold CF. During the afternoon, I will keep, together with Fran from Zaidzi, a talk about Apache Manifold. So if you are interested, you can follow the other presentation about this project. And I'm also a contributor of JBoss, so I contributed a lot on JBoss portal and all the projects around the JBoss portal project. As you can see, I don't have free time in my life, so I'm trying to involve all my free time in contributions, open source communities, and trying to help people to be involved in the communities. So I love open source. Just an overview about this presentation. So we will see an introduction of portals, so the basics concepts. We will see how to implement different type of portlets. So I tried to get outside the world of specific portal vendors, such as Liferay or other similar things. So I tried to show only the APIs that you can use to invoke calls against an Alfresco repository. So we will see how to implement standard portlets just to have the basics for you. And then we will see some APIs exposed by Alfresco. And then we will see that there are some remote methods that we can use inside a portlet. So let's start to see the introduction portals section. So we will see the basics of the portal words very quickly. So typically, if you use a portal, you have to manage dynamic content in your website. So you need to have some HTML fragments that needs to be dynamic, and probably it depends on the specific user session that you are using and on other variables that you have in the page context. So you need to have an extremely dynamic fragments for each page of your website. On the other side, you need a page approach. So the portal is a page-centric application. So this means that the basic component for a portal is the portal itself and the page. So inside the page, you will attach and drag all the components and the applications that you want to show in that fragment of the page. Inside a page, we will see that we can drop different type of applications. So we will see standard portlets, applications. So if you have a standard web app built on, for example, Spring MVC or JSF, you can expose this application in the page fragment. There are some frameworks named bridge projects that allows you to match an MVC feature inside a portal fragment. And there are gadgets. So many portal vendors now allows you to implement applications and fragments or portlets, as you, let me say, as you want to name it, using XML and JavaScript, for example, OpenSocial. So you can use different ways to implement portlets. So we have a wide range of choice. You need to aggregate contents, and probably if you need to use a portal, you have different providers for your contents, and probably each provider is based on different technology. For example, a PHP application, Java application, .NET application. So when you need to use a portal, when you have different goals, okay? Because sometimes I see working on customers that sometimes they choose to use a portal in a bad way. So the portal must be used when you have some goals that are matched with the features and the requirements of the customer. Okay, so you have user session, you need user session, you need an extremely dynamic page for each user because you can set permission for each specific fragments of the page. And you need enterprise services. So you need to map all the users and all the enterprise features when you import this architecture inside the infrastructure of the customer. So you need to have some features binded to the environment of the customer. For example, the authentication provider, the authorization provider, because sometimes it could be not the same provider. And you need some kind of framework that helps you to personalize the editing feature of the portal. So, I mean, the portal is a framework for us. So we have to use in the right context. That's why many portal vendors has different enterprise services. So it depends on what are the requirements, what requirements are exposed by the needs for the customer. The portal is a web application, so this is a page, and we have different fragments, different portlets for each section. So we could have a top portlet, we could have a center portlet, and a right portlet. And we can separate each portlet in different fragments. So we can have a different level of fragments inside the portal and inside the page. So it depends on the requirements that you have to implement for the project. What is the portlet? The portlet is the application that has the main role, the main goal of a portlet is to show a fragment that is dynamically generated from a logic, a specific logic. So we have a little business logic implemented inside a portlet with typically with just some features, not all the features of the portal. So the suggestion is not to implement all the features inside a unique portlet, but use different portlets and implement for each portlet a specific feature for your portal. The output could depend on the permission. So you can have a different fragment, HTML fragment, exposed by a portlet depending on the specific user session. Okay? The permission schema that you can use in a portal is based on 3 different levels. So you can set a specific permission for a user on the entire portal, for a specific page, or a portlet. In this way, a single page could be viewed in different ways for different users. So you can set permission for the specific portlet. In this way, one page could be viewed in different ways for different users. If you have these requirements, it's clear. A portlet is an application, and we will see different ways to implement the portlet. We have a standard, so the pure Java means a standard implementation, so that follows the specification, the Java specification of portlets. And as you can see, we have many different frameworks that could be used to implement portlets. So if you have an existent application that is based on one of these frameworks, so you can expose some of these features as portlets without re-implementing the portlet. Okay? So you have done the implementation, so you have the implementation on a different way using one of your your own framework, because you are very skilled on this framework, so you don't need to reinvent the wheel. You don't need to re-implement the portlet. You could expose one of these features as portlets. We have different roles too, so users can be configured to access some pages, but can have, for example, an edit role. This way, directly on the page, some portals vendors provide the editing features in line on the page. So in this way, just a double click on the fragment and the portlet will start in the edit mode. The portlet container is the container of portlets. So this is the runtime mechanism that allows you to host portals, and for each portal, pages, and for each page, portlets. So the portlet container is the framework that allows you to build your portal. The implementation is described in the Java portlet specification. So the implementation is based on the specification, and each vendor has implemented some new features against the portal to provide new portlet and new functionalities. We can embed the portlet container. If you don't like how Liferay or JBoss Portal manages portals and portlets, so you can re-implement the user interface, and you can embed the portlet container inside your application. Okay, you have a module, a separated module in all the portal vendors projects that allows you to use only the portlet container. So this is a hint that I'm saying now to you, because sometimes these interfaces are not very user-friendly for final users and administrators. So you can rebuild an administration console easily. The portlet container allows us to host the portal instances. For each portal, we have pages and then portlets. So one instance, a physical instance of a portlet container, can manage multiple portals, multiple websites. Why you should use a portal? Because probably you have different requirements, and probably you have not only the need to provide personalized features, allows users to change permissions or change the HTML fragment, but also the integration feature is very important. Probably if you have different heterogeneous systems that you need to bind or cover with a unique portal, unique websites, so the portals helps you a lot, because you have the many features that allows you to cover all the requirements. You can implement public portal, private portal, intranet, and you can embed easily different platforms, such as an e-commerce platform or an enterprise content management application, such as Alfresco, for example. So Alfresco is, has many APIs, many ECM has many APIs, but here we are talking about the ways how you can invoke the call on Alfresco. And portlets are based on enterprise Java standards. This means that we have enterprise deployment descriptors for portlets. So we are using standards. So we are not reinventing the wheel using portlets. The dashboard is a specific concept in a portal that allows users to manage, to aggregate portlets that these users want to see every day on the home page of the portal. So after the login, each user can choose which are the portlets that wants to see for the first time. This is an optional feature that Portals have. So, but in a social context, could be useful to provide a dashboard for final users in a portal. How Portal works has any servlet container and application servers. So the first file that was involved in the loading of portlets is the portlet.xml. So the portlet.xml is the enterprise descriptor. So in this file, we will put all the information about the implementation, the description for the portlet, and the different modes that we want to use for the portlet. So let's see how to implement standard portlets. Just a quick overview about the basics. We have different methods. So in our Java class, we have different methods binded to the requirements, so, and the states of the portlet. Each portlet can have multiple states, so the view, edit, and the help are 3 different states for the portlet. So the doView method will help you to implement the standard mode of the portlet, so the output of the fragment, the HTML fragment. The doEdit allows to change the mode for allowing editors to edit the content. The doHeaders helps you if you have some, for example, JavaScript files that you want to use, some Ajax calls or other similar stuff that you want to include in the portal. So the doHeaders helps you to include the meta tag, to include the JavaScript in the portal page, not in the specific portlet fragment. And then we have the init and the destroy method for your Java resources. The process action, the first method, will be used to manage the MVC lifecycle, the MVC model. In the process action, you will pass the specific action that you want to render in the portlet. For example, give me the results of a search, or please give me the search form, if you have different web flow for your portlet. So let's see how we can implement standard portlets very quickly, because we are not talking about Alfresco until now. Now I'm using the getting portal, but the portal vendor is a detail, so it's not important. I'm just to log in the portal. I have to log in. As root. Now I have here a standard portlet. This standard portlet allows you to manage the view mode and the edit mode. Now we have only shown to you the welcome message, and we can change the welcome message, changing the state of the portlet. The portlet supports the edit mode, and the edit mode allows us to change that value. Okay, now I have added this word. We will see in the Alfresco portlets that we'll have the edit mode that will allow us to change the different things. For example, the endpoint of our Alfresco repository, for example. The implementation of this standard portlet consists of these methods. So we have the display method that will manage the view mode of the portlet. We have the doEdit to manage the edit mode. And we have the init to implement to create new instances for our needed resources. For example, the parameter that we want to manage in the edit mode. So in the display method, we are managing the web flow, and the first thing that we have to do is to get the parameter. So now here in this specific implementation, I'm using portlet preferences. Portlet preferences are stored values that we can use to store preferences and values inside the database of the portal. If there is no database, probably there is a repository for the portal. In this way, the next time that I will reload the portlet will use the same value, the same last value that the user has stored in the portal. This way, I'm getting the value, and then I'm managing the view with a value object. Typically, in the model, you can separate the value object level from the model level. So in this way, we have an object dedicated to show on the view the output parameters. Here, we have two parameters, the welcome message that I want to change in the edit mode, and then the username, because in the portlet session, I can get the username of the user. In the edit mode, in the due edit mode, I will manage the parameter. So here, I will set the attribute for letting the portal to store the new value inside the portlet preferences store. Workspace, as you want to name. This is the same approach that I will follow during this presentation for all the other portlet types. So now let's start to talk about Alfresco portlets. The first API that we will see is the Alfresco Web Services API. This is the first remote API that was implemented in Alfresco, and it was based on an enterprise service bus approach. So this API allows you to use a subgroup of services, so you don't have all the Alfresco services exposed. So we have, you can manage contents, you can execute queries, but you don't have all the services of Alfresco. So we have different services. We have the authoring, the classification, the access control, and we have also the dictionary. So we have many features exposed. And the good point of this API is that it's based on the SOAP protocol, and you can execute multiple operations inside a single SOAP message. So imagine an enterprise service bus scenario. Typically, you have the message that will be exchanged between different providers, different providers, and the message must include all the operations, all the functionalities that you want to invoke on Alfresco. So here, using the content manipulation language that is included, that is used inside this API, you can embed in a single message different operations, different create operations, different add aspects, different update operations against a repository, okay, without exchanging different HTTP calls. So just a unique message and a unique response message. You can create, update, and remove different nodes against Alfresco with a single SOAP message of this API. So this API must be used when you need to use the SOAP protocol and when you want to, you don't want to make too much call against the Alfresco repository. The example is based on a search portlet. So we have different, this is just two states. We have the view states with the search form, and this is an example of how you can execute a query using this API. Here we have the reference object that is similar to the node reference object. It's different because here we can point at one node without know the node reference. So the reference can be configured just only with the path. So I can set the path of the node, and remotely Alfresco will map that path with the node. So we don't need to execute a search and then take the node ref to execute the operation. Here we can use the reference object with the path of the node. We can set the predicate, and the predicate could include many references object. That's why there you see the reference array. And then for executing a query, you need to build the query object and then execute the query method inside the repository service of the Alfresco Web Services API. The result set, it's tricky to manage. So you can get all the rows, and in the result set, using this API, you have all the metadata, all the properties. So you have to do a similar thing, tricky thing, to get all the values. Okay, it's not a good approach for an API. But anyway, this was the first API, remote API implemented in Alfresco, and anyway, it works. And in an enterprise service bus scenario, must be used because helps you a lot. Let's see this portlet in action. So we have the same portal, and we have a different portlet here. So here I've just implemented a search feature. So for example, I can search a keyword, Alfresco. And then all the result set is here with another view state of the portlet to show all the results. Here we have just a simple JavaScript to paginate, to create the paging feature of the portlet. Clicking on the results, we can see the content itself. This portlet has an edit mode as the previous one. And the edit mode allows you to set the endpoint of Alfresco. So during this presentation, I didn't want to talk about authentication or single sign-on because I don't want to enter in that country. Let me say country. Just this presentation, the goal of this presentation is to show you the different ways, different APIs that you can use in Alfresco. Each portal vendors allows you to extend the authentication mechanism to provide a single sign-on feature. So here, we don't have time to talk about authentication. The most important topic here is the different APIs that we are using. So here we can change the endpoint and the user that we want to use for this portlet. But let me say that changing the configuration of Alfresco, for example, we can configure the external authentication. And the external authentication of Alfresco allows us to invoke HTTP calls against the repository. If you decorate the HTTP call, adding the username header in the HTTP call, the Alfresco will impersonate that user. Okay, so there are different ways to integrate Alfresco on the authentication side. Let's see the implementation. The implementation is following the same approach. So we have the portlet here and we have the different methods. So the display method will manage the flow again, and here we have to manage the standard on-view state, so the search form, and then the result view, okay? So here you have to manage the view if you want to implement a standard portlet. The search action will invoke the repository service and will build the query. So the query is built taking the parameter from the form and then building the query and execute the query from the repository service. So in this way, we can get the result set and then setting in a value object in the output as a value object, setting the results in the JSP of the portlet. So I don't want to show you the JSP because we don't have time to talk about the JSP tags or other stuff. But here we have an object. We can set the download URL, the name for the content, and we have an array, a list to iterate inside the JSP file. Okay, so let's see another approach to implement portlets. Spring WebScripts. Before showing you Spring WebScripts, I want to show you OpenCMIS. So I'm sorry because I don't have time to switch the portal context. So let's see the OpenCMIS approach. So OpenCMIS is an implementation of the content management interoperability services provided by the Apache Software Foundation. The model is based on the concept of the repository. We have the object, and we have some services in a very similar way that we have inside Alfresco. So we have some services to navigate the content, to invoke changes on content, and to associate content. We have different capabilities for each repository because CMIS allows us to manage for a specific endpoint different CMIS repository, and these repositories can have different capabilities. So from the protocol, we can ask which are the capabilities that this repository have, and then we can invoke different operations, the right operations that that repository supports. The object model is based on four object types. So we have the document, the folder, the relationship in Alfresco named association, and then the policy. The policy allows us to manage some cross features of the repository. So it's in a very similar way we can see inside Alfresco using aspects, for example. And we have the ID, properties, and we have all that metadata that we need to manage the access control list for each content. We have different services. So the repository allows us to getting some information about the repository. We have the navigation service to manage the navigation hierarchy. So if you want to navigate the repo without executing search. And we have object services to manipulate content. The discovery services allows us to execute different queries, to find objects, to find contents. OpenCMIS allows us to have two different bindings. So we have the AtomPub, the SOAP, or the SOAP binding. Another specific way is that there is not only the client API of OpenCMIS, we have also the server API. So if you want to expose your repository using CMIS, you can implement that API, and you can have a CMIS endpoint for your specific repository. for your specific service. So this is an example of how you can invoke CMIS call. This is the create session feature. So we need to create a session factory. Then we have to set the user, and then we can choose the binding. We can choose the binding and invoke the create session. So just a parameter to manage if we want to use the AtomPub binding or the SOAP binding. Again, we have the same portlet implemented using OpenCMIS. So this is the way that you can use to execute a query. So we have the query for OpenCMIS is based on the SQL specification. So we have a select, and each content type in the repository will be matched as a table in the SQL table model. The query method allows us to execute the query, and then we can iterate the result set to get each object metadata. So we have a different way to invoke calls against the Alfresco repository. We have another standard. So let's see the portlet in action. So we have the same feature. And here we have CMIS search. Here I've implemented the configuration inside the view mode of the portlet. This is a different approach for implementing portlets. So here I can configure my Alfresco. And now I'm trying to getting the result from the same query, and we have the same results. Okay, so now we have the same results implemented in a different way using the OpenCMIS API that Alfresco provides us. Here we have the WebDAV link for the download. So again, the authentication feature is not managed for this, for this presentation. So this is not the goal of the presentation. So we want to focus only on the different API. So the CMIS portlets, let's see the implementation. So again, we have the same portlet methods. Again, the display method will manage the different web flow for the portlet. And here we have the view for the search form, with the view state for the search form. We have the we have to manage the edit mode because we want to configure in the same state the portlet, and the error message. Okay. The query will be executed in the search form action again. No, search results action, sorry. And here we will see the configuration from the edit mode of the portlet. Here we are getting the parameters, then we are setting in the value object all the parameters, and then we want to store all the portlet preferences inside the portal. In this way, the second time that I restart the portal, I'll see the same values. Here we have a utility method that I have implemented, getCMIS session. So the getCMIS session has the same instructions that we have seen in the previous slide. So here we are creating the session factory. We have used the user and the password taken from the configuration. And then we have started the session, the CMIS session, from getting the default repository exposed by the endpoint, the CMIS endpoint. In this case, Alfresco repository. Okay, I have to go more faster. This is the query method in action. So here in the full text search method, we have the session.query. So in the CMIS, there are some methods that are provided directly from the session object. So here, I'm not using the specific service, but we have the query method exposed by the session object. So, and here I have invoked the query method with a statement built with the statement variable taken from a constant for the standard query that is a full text query. Okay, this is the equivalent, this is the same query in the SQL language that we have seen in the previous portlet. Okay. Let's see another API. So now I have to change the deployment scenario because we will see the WebScript Portlet, and the WebScript Portlet allows you to implement a portlet implementing a WebScript. And the deployment scenario is different because now I have an instance of Alfresco and an external instance of a portal. Now I will start an instance with the portal and Alfresco in the same container, in the same portlet container. So I have to stop. But I think that we don't have time. I don't have time to see in action the WebScript portal, but I'll show you all the information. I'm sorry. The WebScript API the WebScript framework allows us to implement Portlet implementing a specific WebScript. So the hint is inside the descriptor, and here we have the URL of the service. So probably you know very well WebScript's framework. When you have to deploy the portlet implemented with the WebScript, you can choose different authentication mechanisms. So the JSR 168 is taking the user from the portal session. Otherwise, it's taking the user from the cookie created by Alfresco. So you have two different authentication mechanisms. The hint here is that you have the portlet.xml with two different parameters, init parameters for the portlet. The first for the authenticator, the second one for the WebScript that you want to expose as a portlet. So we are not implementing the portlet using Java, but using the WebScript framework. This is possible only if you are deploying Alfresco in the same portlet container of the portal. So here we have the same query. So we have a Lucidi query, and we have some results. The demo will show these results. So I'm sorry, but I can't show you in action these web scripts, and I have to go forward on the other API. So the same approach that I've shown you now for the WebScript is for the Spring Surf portlet. So here we have, again, WebScripts, but we have remote WebScripts. The hint here is that the Surf framework will render with different state the component. The component is the WebScript, and the Surf has a concept of page. So if you want to include a page from Surf inside a page of a portal, you can do that, and you can use the proxy portlet. The proxy portlet provided by Spring Surf allows you to include a specific page or a component of Surf. This way you can exchange data, rendered data from Surf and Portal. And you can show a component or a Surf page directly inside the portal. So the flow is this one. So we have the portal that starts to render the page. The page has some portlets. The proxy portlet provided by Surf will start to render the Surf page, and then we'll start to render the region and the components. The components are web scripts. Alfresco executes all the web scripts. And inside the portal page, you will have the HTML fragments generated by the Spring Surf web scripts. I'm sorry, I don't have time to show you all in action. Too bad. So if you want to know more about these integrations, you can contact me with Twitter, or sending you an email, or chatting now during the event, and I will be here tomorrow too. So thank you for your attention.